Very good. Well, welcome everyone to the Poultry Science Association's fall webinar. We're excited that you're here and could join us today. PSA continues to try and share information and key speakers that are relevant to the poultry industry. I'm Doug Britton, and I serve as the Secretary Treasurer for the Poultry Science Association, and we're excited about this webinar today with Dr. Parker Hall from Perdue. But before we get started, let me go over a few tips and tricks for using Zoom. And I know many of us may be familiar with this. All right, can you give one more minute for them to join? Yes, I will do that. So thank you, Rebecca. We'll give everyone just another minute to join in before we launch onto the webinar. I was too excited to get started, I guess. You just give me the green light, Rebecca, whenever you're ready.
Okay, Dr. Britton, you should be good to go now.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Poultry Science Association's fall webinar. We're very excited that you're able to join us today as the Poultry Science Association continues to find interesting speakers and share important information relevant to the poultry industry. My name is Doug Britton, and I am the Secretary Treasurer for the Poultry Science Association. It's my pleasure to host you this afternoon. Before we get started and I introduce our speaker, let's go over a few tips for using Zoom and Zoom webinars in particular. So this webinar is being recorded and will be available on the PSA website within about 24 hours. If you have a question during the time that we're meeting together today, please use the Q&A tab at the bottom of the screen. When you click on the Q&A tab, you'll be able to insert or write a question. Please don't use the raise hand icon, as we're not going to be having attendees ask questions using that method or speaking their questions in today. Instead, use the Q&A tab, and either someone will answer your question directly, or we will I will moderate it and present it to the speaker for an answer during the Q&A session at the end of the webinar. All attendees are welcome to like or comment on other attendees' questions. And so if you see a question that's, oh, that was my question as well, please feel free to click it a like and give it a like, and we'll try to elevate those up and make sure we get those covered during today's webinar. If we run out of time to answer the questions of the webinar, we'll try to get we'll try to get those questions answered as best we can and then put those back out to you. The chat option has also been disabled for this webinar, but feel free to, again, use the Q&A tab. Subtitles are enabled for this webinar, and you can turn them on by clicking on the live transcript icon at the bottom of your screen and selecting hide subtitles or unhide subtitles. So now let's move on. We're excited this afternoon to have Dr. Parker Hall, who is the Vice President of Research and Development and Innovation for Perdue Foods LLC. He and his team have the responsibility of developing and commercializing new and innovative food products, packages, processes, and identifying emerging technologies in each of those areas at the Perdue Innovation Center in Salisbury, Maryland. His team works across a variety of different areas, including retail, which is both fresh and prepared, food service, so the national accounts and distribution, the premium prepared meat sector, beef, pork, and lamb, as well as the pet businesses. And he leads his team in the disciplines of product development, packaging engineering, process engineering, culinary, and sensory and product guidance, as well as consumer and customer insights. Dr. Hall is a 35-year veteran in the food and beverage industry and has spent and his leadership experience in food processing, ingredient technology, food development research has led him through many of those positions, but most recently with Perdue Foods. His technical expertise is in meat science, specifically the functionality of meat protein. His functional expertise is leading and motivating his team to deliver innovative and profitable product solutions. He received his PhD in food technology from Clemson University. And as you may know, Clemson played Georgia Tech this past week in football and made us look a little bad. So I'll have to just take that one on the chin there, Dr. Hall. But we are super excited to have you with us today and to be able to join us as our webinar for the fall series. So welcome, Dr. Hall, and the floor is yours.
Great. Thank you, Doug. And so tight game through 3 quarters, but then got a little better for Clemson toward the end there. But anyway, we'll do it again next year, right? So again, thank you for that introduction, and thank you to the Poultry Science Association for having me today to present on the topic of detection, prevalence, and disposition of myopathic chicken breast meat. As mentioned, I do work for Perdue Foods, and so you will see here a number of references to existing work and things like that. Hopefully, I'll share a few new things with you that are more sort of internal to the walls of Perdue, but would be beneficial to the industry that may not necessarily always get published somewhere. But we'll go from there and see where we land. So I think most, particularly of this group, would know that poultry meat is a primary driver of growth in meat production, and it looks like through 2031 that will continue to be the case. There is a long-term shift in consumption toward poultry, and that continues to strengthen. We've heard recently that beef production is slowing. There are a number of reasons and factors for that, but there is some shift to preferences for poultry meat. And of course, globally, protein availability is expected to grow through 2031. And the per capita meat consumption here, North America, the part that I have starred there, about 49.5 kilograms per capita. That's retail weight, all items, all in, which is just a little bit north of 108 pounds per person per year. So it does make this topic of conversation important as we go forward. So what about these myopathies? There are 3 that we'll talk about today: white striping, spaghetti meat, and woody breast. We'll spend most of our time on woody breast or hard muscle. It's termed several different things throughout the literature, as well as the way we talk about it colloquially internally here. But those are the 3 myopathies that we'll mention today. We can see that prior research has indicated that 5 to 10% of all boneless, skinless breast meat is affected, and resulting in $200 million in loss, and that was in 2016. I've suggested it's much higher than that now. And incidence of wooden breast was found in 53% of 474 inspected carcasses back in 2017 in the research cited there. Again, you can see that these myopathies exist across the world, and you can see some of the circled areas there and the percentages of white striping, woody breast, and spaghetti meat, where those myopathies are most well represented. So it is a meat quality issue. It's not a public health concern. It's not pathogenic. It is a meat quality issue, and it certainly influences consumers' acceptance of meat products. Because as you can see in the graph here, the normal muscle, normal fillet on the left side, and then there's white striping, and then there's woody breast, and then there's spaghetti meat. And while I will talk mostly about woody breast today, I would say spaghetti meat is probably the one that deserves more attention. And I think there is some research going on in that area now to understand it better, how we might go about preventing it and things like that. I'll make some comments over it, but again, the topic today will be focused more on item C there, woody breast. Again, here's the prevalence of those myopathies, and there are different degrees of them within each of the various ones. White striping, mild white striping exists in almost 94% of all fillets in this study. You have the presence or absence of spaghetti meat, about 36% where it's present. And then the woody breast one, where you only have just short of 18% where a fillet is not affected as a result of this Canadian study. And they also happen to occur together. And so what you can see on the right-hand chart there is there were only in this study only about 305 normal fillets. And then where you can see white striping present, there were a little over 1,000. And then where there was woody breast present, there 4,500. And so when you start to combine these things, in spaghetti meat, 3,000. So when you start to combine these things, you see that fillets, about 85% of all fillets in this study were affected by 2 of the myopathies. And that 305 represents only about 3% of the total that had none. So again, I mentioned spaghetti meat, and here's some scoring of that spaghetti meat. So you can see a normal fillet on the left, and then as we go from left to right, you get more and more severe to extreme. And it's just really a delamination of the muscle fibers. And it is really, I think there's a couple of factors, and I know, again, those factors are being studied, but with the advent of auto deboning versus hand deboning, you can really see it very quickly once the fillet is removed from the carcass, and just that pulling apart of the muscle bundles and fibers, it's very easy to see visually. Not only does it affect the fillet or the pectoralis major, it also, we're finding it in pectoralis minor or the tender. And I would suggest here that there should be another picture to the right of severe, which is really severe, where you can really, it almost looks like the fin of a fish where all of the fibers are separated. It's almost fan-like. I term it fanning, some term it gaping. But there should be another picture to the right of severe here where it's even more severe than is shown here. So next, let's talk about characteristics and prevalence. And this is really, again, focused on woody breast. So as you can see, a fairly well-researched topic as far back as 2013. And of course, you'll see some 2021, 2022 data here. And this is just a little bit of a lit review, but I've highlighted some of those characteristics: hardness throughout, stiffness, hardness, seen in heavier birds, often more in males than females. Again, there's increased hardness, higher weights, breast yield, less protein functionality, higher pH, lower protein, higher moisture and fat. Again, all of these things are well researched, and these folks have done a nice job in their work and to document these things in such that we can compare and contrast with existing work. So here is a good example on the left side of a normal breast, unremarkable there, and then the one on the right is woody, and so you can see the sheen and the coloration differences. And sometimes the picture doesn't do this justice, in that if you have seen these or touched these in person, they're very, very slick and slimy, and And so that you can really, once you have one in your hand, you can know it. So on the right, you can see on the top is the hard muscle. It's very rigid, doesn't bend over in the middle, versus the one below it where the normal muscle has some flexibility to it. And then there's a lot of things going on microscopically as well. So really 4 things: myodegeneration, perivascular inflammation, fibrosis, and lipidosis. And if you think back to some of the things that were in the lit review there about the things that the characteristics of it, some of these things are what's happening cellularly that are causing those things to happen, or are the result of those things that happen in woody breast. So not good, and is creating a problem in meat quality. So there are some risk factors. So on the left, you'll see the spaghetti meat. And in this study from Che and others at the University of Guelph, they've identified 8 significant variables on spaghetti meat and 9 on woody breast. And so you can kind of read through those there. Live weight, source of chicks, time at lairage are some common ones. But again, seasonality and things like that. But focusing on the woody breast ones, that live weight, the heavier the bird gets in a shorter amount of time, the more incidence of woody breast there is. The source of chicks, this was a Canadian study, so I think roughly, I might get this backwards and somebody can correct the record later if I get it wrong, but it's about 80% of the chicks in Canada come from the US, only 20 are domestic. If it's the other way around, so no, you'll have to let me know. And then mortality rate, whether a coccidiosis vaccine has been administered or not, hold time at lairage at the plant, how many birds are in a crate at a time, DOAs, loading duration, and season. So those are just sort of the written risk factors. Here's an easier way to look at it. On the left, if you see average live weight, as average live weight goes up, the odds of developing both spaghetti meat and woody breast both increase. Temperature during grow out in the house, as it increases, the odds of developing spaghetti meat and woody breast both increase. And then there's some confounding factors here with the coccidiosis vaccination. You can see an increase in spaghetti meat, but a decrease in woody breast. The source of chicks that we briefly discussed a moment ago has a positive effect on one and a negative on the other. And then hold time at lairage, again, same with increased hold time, spaghetti meat is more likely to occur and woody breast is less. So what are some conclusions from these characteristics and the prevalence? Well, it certainly is complex and multifactorial. It's influenced by demographics, the health, the husbandry, and environmental factors. Mild white striping is the new normal. And so far we've seen, and we'll talk about this more as we go along, up to 33% of breast fillets exhibit some spaghetti meat characteristics. Greater than 10% of breast fillets are identified as severe woody breast. And the myopathies tend to occur, co-occur with others, as just mentioned, where you have things that happen that cause both spaghetti meat and woody breast to happen at the same time. That positive association with live weight at harvest, the high temperature during grow out. And there are 3 factors that I mentioned that have opposite effects on developing spaghetti meat and woody breast. I also say, and again, I know that there are a number of folks that are working in the area of spaghetti meat to help identify the genesis of it, what causes it, how it happens, how can we control it, how can we reduce it. but it does not share the same pathogenesis as woody breast. So there may be some mechanical disruption after harvests through the chillers and pickers. And then there is some data out there saying that chilling method, water versus air, influences spaghetti meat development, with more being found through water chilling versus air chilling. So now we know we have it. So what do we, how do we find it? And so this may be where I think some new information. I don't know if people have seen the most recent, and I'm not sure what you can see on your end, but the most recent edition of Watt Poultry USA, the August 2022 edition, where the title on the cover story is "Breast Meat Myopathies Decline as New Strategies Emerge." So we'll talk a little bit about that. If you want to skip to the end and get to the quick version of what I'm going to say today, just go read that article. It covers it. So some good information in there. I didn't get permission to reprint any of that today, but it's a good document to go take a look at, that Petracci, Owens, and others have commented on. But I may be able to bring some real numbers to some of the areas that were discussed in there on how much of it exists, what's the real number, things like that. So we'll proceed through there. So what you see here is purchased product out of the marketplace. There are 7 companies identified here. These are all manufacturers identified by their establishment number, and what over time, where we've accumulated samples and we've passed them through a NIR type process machine that does that. There's several manufacturers of those out there. I'm not going to identify the one we use, but what you can see here, this is machine graded normal, mild, and severe hard muscle. And again, these 7 companies represented here. So the scale is 0 to 100. It's like a golf score. A lower number is better than a higher number. And anything in that sort of 65 and less is mild or normal, and below 50 is normal. Anything above 65 is considered severe. And this is retail product. So that's important. We'll talk about that some more in a minute as well. But as you can see here, Company A has only normal meat in tray pack chicken. This is all tray pack, fresh, purchased out of the marketplace by all of these 7 different manufacturers. Perdue is included in these numbers. Can't tell you which one, but they're there. Company B, you can see, but then start to look at D and F. They are getting 1.1 to 1.3% of severe woody breast into a tray package that a consumer is going to pick up and take home and likely be dissatisfied with. So just general knowledge through our sensory group here. What we often know about chicken is that the consumer tends to blame themselves when they don't have a good eating experience on chicken. So while this myopathy has been around for a while and we know that it's making it out into the marketplace, it's not often that we get blamed for it. And so, but we're not always putting out the best product. So it's important that we identify it, find a way to find it, and then keep it out of the streams where consumers might be disappointed. So in the second table, you can look at these, all of these suppliers were within those 4 geographic regions: Delmarva, Mid-Atlantic, Northeast, and South. And I circled Delmarva and the Northeast. As you can see, Delmarva tends to have the lowest amount of normal and the most, close to the most amount of mild, and definitely the most severe. Whereas the Northeast, the producers that are in that area have none. So this would lead you to believe there's some geographical opportunities there, but again, there are other factors, not just geography, of course. So looking at the range of scores, and again, those same 7 companies, and look at the range hard muscle score here. Again, low score is better than a high score. So company A had the most low scores, almost 81%, whereas company D had almost 3% that were in that range that was in the severe, high mild, or high intermediate to severe hard muscle in the package. So just taking another look at it by manufacturer. So each of these companies, C, D, and E, produced for more than one brand. It could be branded, it could be a store brand or a private label brand. So company C produced 3 different products. So their establishment number was on 3 different branded items. And same, there were 2 for D and 2 for E, with a focus on company D, tended to have the most higher scores in the 41 to 60 range and the 61 to 80 range. And then company E with brands S and T they were a little bit bipolar here, in that one of their brands had a fairly low amount of scores in the 0 to 20 range, but a high amount of scores in the 61 to 80 range. But another brand that they produced in the same facility with the same establishment number had 74% low scores and no high scores. And then one last slide here to kind of show you another effect. Here's the weight range. Again, same sort of slide, but on fillet weight. So this is one fillet, not a butterfly, it's the fillet itself. And so you can see where I have the yellow highlights here, 400 to 500 grams, which is a pound. That's a 1 pound fillet. It's very large. And then you have some that are 500 to 600 grams, which is 600 grams is nearing up on 1.5 pounds per fillet. So you can see as time goes along here and the increase in fillet weight, you start to see trending where you have higher numbers of, if you reference back to the other chart, you'll see that the scores tend to go up, higher woody breast scores than some of the lower, lighter weight fillets. But it's out there. There are, I don't know if any of you have purchased a 1 pound fillet, but it's pretty big. You kind of feel like you need to do something with it, cut it in half or something. Those are big fillets. So this is just a line graph of those manufacturers. So on the x-axis, you'll see the fillet weight in grams, and then you'll see the woody breast score on the y-axis. And you can see some lines are steeper than others. So as weight increases, the woody breast score increases quickly, as in this case. And then there's one here where for every 100 grams of fillet weight, the TOMRA score goes up about 10 points, much higher here in this graph, in this line on the graph. And shown a slightly different way, again, as fillet weight increases, TOMRA score increases, some at a higher rate than others. So we'll share some data, and this refers also back to the Watt Poultry USA August edition, where the cover story again said that myopathies are in decline. I was skeptical when I read that, so I did pull some data and would tend to agree with them. It appears that over time, that normal is increasing and severe is decreasing. So that's a good thing. In this case, this plant is a large bird plant and only 2 years of data. This is year to date. And then last year, so far, we've seen a decrease of almost 19%, but there's still 1.6% severe from last year and 1.3 for this year. And if you look at the number of fillets that are affected, that's 182,000 pieces of meat that were either used in further processing or in a retail pack at the grocery. So while that number is coming down, it's still a lot, and it's disappointing consumers. And so we, again, are looking for ways to mitigate the issue with consumers. Also referenced in the Watt Poultry article were the breeders. And I would say this is consistent with what they've told us, that we should see roughly a 10% reduction year on year of the amount of severe woody breast that we see. This shows a little bit better than that, but moving on to the second slide and a second plant where we have more data. And really the thing to look at here is the bottom right. There's your roughly on average 10% a year, almost 11% a year reduction. So that's in agreement with what the breeders are saying that we can expect. But just look at the year on year trends here from 19 to 20. We saw an increase of nearly 22.5%. Then from 20 to 21, minus 14, and then 2021 through current time here, we've seen a 19% reduction in the amount of woody breast. But that percentage and the sheer number is still something that we need to reduce more and or find alternate use for, and not have consumers disappointed. So we talked about large bird. We should mention small bird as well. So there are two small bird plants highlighted here. One had only 0.8 mild woody breast, and the other had 3.3% mild woody breast. All other fillets were normal, so there were no severe in the small bird plants, where you're growing to a lower weight and there's a lower fillet weight as well. And very few scores, right around the 60 mark. And then these are the highest scoring fillets here, with the highest being 64. And then here are the lowest scoring fillets in the single digits. And then there's some comments here. And I should take note here that what we do is, even though we're using a machine to score these, we also take samples and bring them in and cook them. We call it chicken unhappy hour around here. So we take some of those that are on the high end and on the low end, and we cook them and see if the eating quality agrees with the score that it's been given. That helps calibrate machines and understand what we have and what we need to do with it. So that's why that's important there. But you can see here the minimum weights were right around 200, with the highest weights being on the average weights being in the right around 310 if you put those two together. And that you still had some nearly and slightly over 1 pound breast lobes or fillets in there. And again, here's your high, low, and average scores by those plants. And then there's the question of organic. And I think there was always a thought organic meat, at least internally for us, we believe that that's the highest quality meat we produce. And so we do have those two bird programs in one of our facilities. And so we wanted to look at that and understand, is there less woody breast in organic than our typical no antibiotics ever program? And so what this shows you, that there's no difference between the two. Even though the feed and some of the handling practices are different in organic than they are in NAE relative to space and other things, and then in the ration, they're about the same. And this was over a number of production days where we ran both the organic and the NAE and processed in the same day. But there were, again, no difference in the population broken out by program. But again, lots of fillets here. So even at 2.6 between the two programs, that's 100,000 or so fillets that could disappoint. We also have more than one machine in our network, and we just wanted to see whether or not the machines agree, and they do. That's what this chart tells you. We can rank them from best to worst. It correlates well, particularly at the ends of the spectrum. What you can see here is machine A and machine B. When we ran the same samples through the two different machines, it identified the same 4 best and the same 3 worst, just in a slightly different order from one to the other, but it read them the same. So that's good. And then again, verified in a cook test where the low scoring ones ate well and the high scoring ones did not. So now that we've found it, pardon me, and we can identify it, what do we do with it? And so at the point in time when we decided to use machine grading for determining woody breast, what we have, I was certainly very worried about creating piles of meat that we weren't going to be able to do anything with. And so that was always a concern, but as it's turned out, it's helped us to decide where we map meat internally and how do we use it such that we're creating the best possible product with the raw materials that we have. And so we'll talk a little bit here about utilization in both whole muscle and chopped and formed. So we'll start with whole muscle. So this is some work out of Mississippi State University we collaborated with. And so just looking here at pH, you can see normal on the left, severe on the right, moderate in the middle, but you can see there's a significant difference in pH. There's a significant difference between normal and severe in tumble loss. And then you can look at our color scores and see that lightness is significantly increasing with more woody breast. And this agrees with the literature that's out there. This is part of that literature, of course. So then you take those whole breast lobes and you cook them, or the fillets, and you cook them. And you can see normal has the least amount of cook loss and severe has high, and it's about a 6.5% cook loss penalty there. And then you can look at some of the texture profile analyses, the scores, where with increasing woody breast, you can see that hardness increases, chewiness increases, and shear force increases, with there being a significant difference between normal and moderate and severe in shear force value, that peak shear force value. So here's some additional data. So again, this is sort of in the area of what to do with it. A couple of charts here. This is normal muscle. This is slit, boneless, skinless chicken breast. And so when you transversely slit a chicken breast into 2 pieces, you create the skin side and the bone side. And when you create that skin side and bone side, and you take a look at that from overall liking in normal muscle, consumers tend to like the skin side a little bit better than the bone side. Those 2 numbers are statistically different. In intermediate, you can see the overall score goes down on the skin side and to a much lower score, and is significantly different from the bone side. In severe hard muscle, you split the meat into 2 pieces, top and bottom, or skin and bone side. And again, the skin side is significantly different from the bone side. So what this tells you, and it agrees with what we know about the location of where hard muscle woody breast is that if you split that fillet into two pieces, skin side and bone side, you tend to have a better piece of meat from the bone side than you do from the skin side. So if you check those scores as they go down, they get significantly lower or worse on the skin side as when you separate those out and you prepare them and serve them to consumers. So in here, the skin side, again, sort of the same set of information. If you look at it, skin side, normal, skin side, probable or intermediate, and skin side, hard, you can see they're all significantly different from one another from a consumer perspective, with the scores going down on a 9-point scale when they evaluate those for us. Similarly, the bone side, normal, probable, and hard are essentially the same. There's a little bit of difference there, but all in the low to mid 5s in terms of overall liking. And then if we take the shoulder portion, again, you sort of cut the tail off and you cook that whole piece, the shoulder region of it, normal, you get a score of about a little over 6. And with hard muscle, you get a score of a 5, and those numbers are significantly different. So again, this helps us understand where that hard muscle is, and then helps us decide what we need to do with it. So what are those implications? So we didn't talk too much about marinade, but regardless of marinade, severe woody breast fillets deliver undesirable eating attributes and lower yields than normal breast fillets. Woody breast fillets are harder than normal breast fillets in both cooked and raw, and that's the TPA analysis. I mentioned transverse slitting of the intermediate woody breast fillets into bone side and skin side yields a usable bone side portion. The skin side piece is woody breast. Sorry, let me make sure I said this right. Usable bone side piece. The skin side piece is woody breast and may have alternate uses in further processing applications. And severe woody breast fillets are best used for further process items than in fresh tray pack or whole muscle or frozen whole muscle applications. So moving on to chopped and formed, in this case, a breaded chopped and formed nuggets. Some of the literature here says that descriptive attributes were higher for severe wooden breast as compared to normal, including springiness, hardness, so forth and so on. Back in 2018, ground meat patties made with woody breast and compared to ground meat patties made with normal breast found no significant difference between patties due to in shear force or similar scores in sensory descriptive analyses for hardness, juiciness, cohesiveness, fibrous, rate of breakdown, and we'll talk about all of that here as we move along. So here are some nuggets, and then the first graph on the top here is the pH of the meat that was used. So normal meat on the left, woody breast on the right. The woody breast was significantly higher in pH than normal, and this agrees with the literature. Here's the brine solution that was used to make the nuggets. And while there are some differences here, the pH was a little bit lower for 100% woody versus 100% normal. And I should say that, let me orient you to this graph. From left to right, even though the colors change, I think on the bars, and I'm gonna have to get somebody to correct that, but from left to right, as always, with one exception, 100% normal on the left, and 100% woody on the right. And then at 25% increments in between, with the middle being 50-50, normal 50% normal, 50% woody breast, okay? So here's the brine solution, and then the batch, once it's put together, there is a significant difference. The pH is lower for 100% normal and higher for 100% woody. You take those, you make nuggets out of them, you batter and bread them, and then you cook them, and then you get this information. And again, this is in agreement with literature. There is no difference in overall liking. So it's not all bad news, right? So we know we have woody breast, we know how to find it, and now this helps us know what to do with it. So in terms of overall liking, even though directionally the score is a little lower for 100% woody versus 100% normal, there really is no significant difference here. And these consumers liked the 75% normal, 25% wooden best in terms of empirical score, but again, no significant difference between any of those. Similarly, with flavor, no difference. So again, not all bad news. Opportunity on where to use woody breast once you find it and sort it out. But there is a downside, or there can start to be a downside, even though there's no significance here. There is a big sort of a number difference here between 100% normal in terms of texture and in 100% normal versus 100% woody, even though they're not significantly different. The overall texture gets softer with the inclusion of woody breast meat. But again, no significant difference here. And you'll see later too that sometimes that softer texture is more preferred than somewhere there's none included. And then in terms of choice, forced rank, there was really no difference here between any of the samples. And here is where you start to see the differences in nuggets, the physical values. So what you can see here is in the 100% normal on the left and the 100% woody on the right, even though there's no significant difference there in total cook yield, there is an empirical difference of several percent there. And so that starts to become an issue. Here again, regarding texture and shear force, 100% normal versus 100% woody, you do see a significant difference between those two samples relative to shear force value. So what does all of this mean? 100%, in this case, 100% wooden breast nuggets were too soft, too mushy, too moist, and had the lowest cook yield. Some of the blends were just right for texture attributes. And again, back to the point I was trying to make a moment ago, 100% normal breast nuggets in this case were too firm and too dry. So a little bit of woody breast meat in here helps the texture. And but there was no difference in overall liking, breading adhesion, or ranking of the samples. So in this case, not in all cases, we could recommend up to 75% wooden breast is acceptable in flavor and texture for a breaded nugget. I do have some additional data, which doesn't necessarily always agree with that, but here's a par-fried nugget. So if you look at yield through the fryer, there's essentially no real difference here, about a percentage point between 100% normal and 100% wooden. But again, no difference in overall liking. And I put this in here because I thought it was interesting. There's a well-known national account breaded nugget out there that we've worked on. And we were looking to see, could we include some hard muscle in that at 25%? And in this case, the overall liking scores were significantly different. Now, a 7.5 is a really good score for a nugget. So either of these would be a just fine nugget, but because they were significantly different, we would not proceed with recommending addition of hard muscle into that particular formula. Again, it's not our own formula, it is somebody else's, but again, there was a significant difference, and that's at 25%. Remember on the other slide, we said we could go up to 75%. And again, a little bit more data. Here, what you have, control with no added hard muscle and hard muscle. This is at the 20% inclusion level. The nugget weights were the same. The first yield, which is par cooked to set the color on the breading, and then through the oven, finished off, takes 2 minutes and 15 seconds. You do see a yield difference between that first cook, and this is at reconstitution for 4.5 minutes. You also see about a 1.2% reduction in cook yield between normal, control, and hard muscle at the 20% inclusion. So again, the effect seems to be more in cook yield at times than on other factors. But in this case, you add those two numbers together. So it's a 2.3% difference from manufacturing to home use that you would see in the cook yield test. So moving on to chopped and formed patties, these would be unbreaded. And again, similarly, in this case, without the breading, if you look to the right, there's no difference in appearance, color, or flavor. Again, 100% normal on the left, 100% wooden on the right. No differences in appearance, color, or flavor. There is a difference in texture between 100% normal and 100% wooden, with the 100% wooden having the higher score than the 100% normal, but they are significantly different. And similarly, the overall liking score in the breast patties was liked more than the 100% normal in this case. The yield after cooking, as you can see, again, left to right, normal on the left, 100% woody on the right. You can see about a, what's that, 78 to 68. It's quite a significant reduction in cook yield or percent yield over time from 100% normal to 100% woody. So this is the penalty, is the cook yield. And then moisture release, again, and this graph is the one I mentioned is backwards. The woody is on the left, normal is on the right. So the moisture release was higher in the 100% woody versus the 100% normal, which is the likely driver for that higher overall liking score that we saw in previous slides. And just to mix it up a little bit, instead of 25% increments, we did some work with in thirds. And so we have a unbreaded patty treatment here, where we had control as 100% normal, and the, sorry. And the increments of, and the addition of woody breast at 33, 67, and 100%. So 100% normal to 100% woody. So in the raw breast patties, again, with 100%, sorry, let me make sure I got my factors right. Yep, percent normal breast meat. So left to right, the moisture percent, you can see higher in the 100% woody and lower in, and significantly different than 100% normal. The fat is increased, which follows the literature as well, in 0% normal or 100% woody. The protein level is less in the 100% woody and higher in the 100% normal. And collagen, even though there's slight differences here, more in the 100% normal versus the 100% woody, which would slightly conflict with literature. In the cooked patty, Again, here's where you see the cook losses at 100% woody, the higher cook loss than 100% normal and significantly different. Also in the recon loss, this is first cook, second cook, same thing. You see a higher loss in less loss in the 100% normal than in the 100% woody. And there are your protein values again. And this is protein bind is, and again, you have to follow the charts here. This is 100% normal and 0% normal, 100% woody. And those are significantly different. Higher protein bind and 100% normal than 100% woody. And so what does the consumer say about those? Again, similarly, in this case, the appearance at 100% normal was statistically higher than 100% woody. And then the texture was not different between the two polar ends, and the stuff in the middle is what the consumers tended to like better with the higher empirical scores. But look at the bottom line, overall acceptability, there was no difference. And one more slide from a different study, non-breaded patties, where you can look at the oven yield from 100% normal to 100% wooden. Again, there's a little over a 7% cook yield difference between those two. And then there is a significant difference in the overall liking score, with the 100% wooden having the higher liking score than the 100% normal. So what does all of that mean? That nuggets and patties made with increasing amounts of woody breast, there's a significant impact on product yields. Woody breast, 100% woody breast patties are lower in cook yield compared to 100% normal or any other combination of normal and woody. The protein bind of nuggets and patties is significantly impacted by the addition of increasing amounts of woody breast. As woody breast muscle inclusion increases, there is an increase in flavor, saltiness, moistness, and a decrease in firmness. So it's not all bad news. And similarly, texture of 100% woody breast was significantly more well-liked than that of 100% normal breast patties. No difference in appearance, color, or flavor in the variables. And while consumers prefer the 100% woody breast patties compared to 100% normal and the combination of 75% normal, 25% woody, consideration needs to be given to the cost of loss in yield. And so, and this is a Parker Hall statement, but generally no more than 33% severe woody breast should be added to nuggets or patties to retain product performance and quality. And that's all product dependent and situation dependent, but this is the guideline that we use. And if we plan to use more, we will evaluate that. But we're in general, anything less than 33%, we can usually find the right home for it and not have a problem with performance or quality. So I think we're getting close to time, but let me just say thanks to the Poultry Science Association colleagues, Rebecca, Sam, and Doug, my colleagues here at Perdue Foods, Mike Nolan, Lindsay Hamill, Tessa Jarvis, and many more. My colleagues at the University of Guelph, Shai, Suno, and Dr. Susta, and the team at Mississippi State University, Wes Schilling and his team, and the team at University of Maryland Eastern Shore, Dr. Bach at Dr. Min, sorry, at the University of Maryland Eastern Shore. With that, Doug, I don't know if we have time for questions, but I'm happy to answer
Sure.
a few.
Sure. Thank you, Parker, for that very thorough and very interesting presentation today. We do have a few questions on the chat that I'll read for you, if that's okay.
Okay.
The first one was on slides 19 and 20. Were the breast sizes the same or similar across all the different companies products, or was there a large difference between the size and weight of the products from one company to another? And that's from Samir.
So yes, that's a very good question, and they're different, and so you can see that in slide 21. So that it's an important question, and you're right. But this was purchased product, so we didn't size adjust anything. We bought it right out of the marketplace. But yes, you can see we had the range across all companies was there were a few in the 100 to 200 gram range, and there were just a very few that were 600 plus, with a predominance being in that 300 to 400 gram fillet weight range. Great. So the scores are the scores. It measures woody breast. The machine does, regardless of the size, but it does take those parameters, and we do weigh them.
Good, thank you. The next question is from Sarah, and she said, when discussing 100% normal versus 100% woody breast in formed products, what's the severity of the woody breast when you talk about 100% woody breast? Because there's a range of severity.
Yes. So in our case, that would be a woody breast score of over 70. 70 or higher would be considered severe. So the really, really severe stuff, the stuff that has the yellow gooey exudate on the outside of it, that's generally condemned. This is edible portion. This is not something that the USDA would condemn. This is stuff that has passed through as okay, but it would have a woody breast score of 70 or higher.
Okay, very good. The next question comes from Serenio, and I apologize if I am mispronouncing that. At the beginning of the presentation, you mentioned that the industry is starting to see or observe a reduction in woody breast prevalence. Could you elaborate a little bit more on what you think are some of the strategies that are resulting in that reduction?
Yeah, so I think that was this slide. And so this is my data, and I pulled this because of the article that I mentioned in the Poultry USA August 2022, the cover story there, where it was suggested that there is a decline, and this is only in the case of woody breast. I would say that spaghetti meat is increasing, woody breast is decreasing. I have data that shows that is the case here. If you look at this particular slide, and in our particular case, there are several techniques suggested in here. The two main factors that I'm most aware of, and that's sort of not my field, so I would refer you to that particular reference. But what I can tell you is that internally, what we look at is that bird size, that feed conversion ratio, that rate at which we get. If we can slow that down, you can reduce the amount of severe, but again, there are economic consequences to that. So we know that not growing them so hard so fast is effective. We have to walk a fine line there relative to what we do in that case. And then the one that really has come up through this analysis of data and some other discussions is that environmental temperature in that house. The hotter the house, the more incidence of woody breast that you find. And it's been hot everywhere, right? It's been hot out here on the Eastern Shore, been hot a lot of places. Again, I think there's some genetic factors that our breeders are working on that have helped reduce that. If you took that out and just said that poultry house temperature is the factor, I think you would see this number going up. There have to be some other factors that are causing this number to go down. I can't with confidence at the moment say exactly what those combination of things are, but again, I'll refer you to that article. They suggest a few things in there.
Yeah, and it is a multivariate
Correct.
problem, right? So there's lots of
It is.
potential contributors. I'm glad you mentioned that temperature variation because that was something that stuck out to me as you were presenting as well. And Kevin, I'm hoping that answered your question, which was what can poultry producers do to look at reducing the incidence of woody breast? We'll move on to Don's question. And his question is, what would be the economic value to the typical chicken complex if overall woody breast in all categories were reduced by 50%?
I haven't done that math, but read that one more time for me, Doug.
Yeah, so what would be the economic value to a typical chicken complex if the overall woody breast in all categories was reduced by 50%? If we could reduce woody breast by 50%, what would be the
economic value? Yeah, it's hard to say. I mean, quite frankly, we're sold out, right? And we're selling meat at a good price, and so it's a little bit hard to calculate that. Certainly disappointing a consumer. There's no price you can put on that. That's a loss of a consumer, and we hear it a lot here that we don't that disappointment. People will switch. They'll go find somebody else if they don't produce something that is of the quality that they expect. And so that's our mantra and what we try to do here. And we're trying to find ways to get those reductions. I'd be hard pressed to answer that question in terms of actual dollars and cents, but there's an economic impact in terms of now we have to sort meat differently. We have to put things in bins where those things have to be treated differently. So there are some processing costs that we would get back. There are a number of things throughout the whole system that would benefit if we could make that reduction as described there. I'd be hard pressed to put a number on it though.
Sure. It also is interesting because it seems to me that in terms of likability with further processed meats, that there's a value actually proposition for having some woody breast in that product mix, because it seemed like there was a higher likability score with the mix of woody breast with non-woody breast.
That's right. That's exactly what I meant by right up front saying that, we were concerned about, we're going to create these piles of meat we didn't know what to do with, but good science or happy accident, either one, I'll take good luck. A lot of times we found a way that we can use it effectively and not create a consumer issue.
Sure, great. So the next question is from Casey Owens, who I think was one of the persons interviewed and contributed to the article you mentioned, Watt. And the question is that they found differences in cooking rate between levels of severity with 100% woody breast cooking faster than normal. Did you note any differences in reaching endpoint temperature for the varying formulations?
Yeah, I've been asked that question, and Casey, we do need to evaluate that. We just have been cooking to typical endpoint temperature. I want to say that Mike Nolan, who I reference here, who does this work, he may know the answer to that question. I do not. It would not be surprising to me that that's the case. It's probably something we should add to our mix that did one sample reach its endpoint faster than the other, and to do some work on that. But it doesn't surprise me that that's the case.
Great, then I don't see any more questions online. I have one question that I'm going to ask you, Parker, and that is your observation of the effects of layerage and the opposite impact of spaghetti meat and then woody breast. Do you have any hypothesis or any inclination as to why that might be the case, or what might be contributing to those?
Yeah, that is out of the Canadian study,
Okay.
Dr. Che and others that have reviewed that. And unfortunately, it's probably not my area of expertise, and maybe I shouldn't have reported on that if I couldn't explain it, right? I do not. It is the thing that I showed here just to dance around it just a little bit, Doug, is that there is that impact that you mentioned, that the odds of with increasing hold time increases the amount of spaghetti meat seen and decreases the amount of woody breast. It's an interesting question, and let me follow up with Dr. Che and others, and I'll follow up with you on an appropriate answer for that question.
Sure, no, that sounds fine. And listen, we don't have any more questions on the list. We want to thank you very much on behalf of Poultry Science for coming and giving this webinar, and for being willing to stay several minutes later to answer all the questions. We sincerely appreciate your time and energy in putting this together. So thank you very much for being with us today.
Great, thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Let me give, for those who are still on the call or online, let me give you a quick advertisement for our winter webinar. We've already got that scheduled. Dr. Mike Kogut with the USDA ARS is going to be coming and presenting on December 7th at 11 a.m. Central Time. And so we're excited to have him come. He's going to come and present on the gut's role in poultry health and disease. So we hope you'll be able to join us then. And until then, we look forward to seeing you on the webinars and also in person. So all the best, be safe, and take care. Thank you.